So guys, I want to tell you how to make great Neapolitan pizza, and I get it, it's intimidating. You go online, you search Neapolitan pizza, and there are so many recipes. And I just want to make it really, really simple for you, okay? There's 4 ingredients, and it's just about giving it enough time, and you're going to make amazing pizza every time. So today, it's about giving you a direct, simple, straightforward, every time go-to recipe for Neapolitan pizza. So let's talk about ingredients. 4 ingredients. 00 flour. 00 basically refers to how fine the flour is. And you want to try and get a 00 flour that has a W rating between 280 and 330. What the hell does that mean? Basically, it's talking about the gluten, how strong the flour is. And you want a strong flour so we have an elastic dough. So that's the first thing. Next, we've got sea salt, we've got water, and we have our fresh yeast. And that's it. Today is all about giving you the basic recipe, which is a direct dough. And a direct dough refers to the fact that we put our 4 ingredients in and we knead them together, and then we let it ferment as a direct dough. We're going to do different types of doughs in other videos with pre-ferments, with bigas, poolish, with sourdough. But this one is your standard straightforward dough. So it's your 4 ingredients, you knead them, and you leave them to rise, and that's it. Super simple. So one little tip I'm going to give you is that your salt and your yeast shouldn't be interacting at the same time together. We want to try and keep them separate, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start by putting our water into our mixing bowl. Now, a little word on kneading dough. I've got used to using a dough mixer like this. They're amazing. They're built for this purpose of kneading dough, and I would highly recommend going out and getting a dough mixer. But I get it, if you're just starting out on this new hobby, maybe you want to start by doing it by hand, that's absolutely fine. You can do it by hand, you can do it in a small stand mixer, or you can do it in a mixer like this. It's the same with any hobby. It's up to you how far you want to take it. So once we put our water in, then we add our salt. We've got 25 grams of salt, and we're just going to dissolve the salt in the water. And our salt is dissolved, so that's step 1. Water, salt, that's already 2 of our ingredients down. Now we have our flour and our yeast. Next step, take your flour and just put about that much in. There's no real formula at this stage. I just want you to put about 150 grams of flour and just mix it up. And that is going to act as our barrier for when we put our yeast in. And here is our fresh yeast. And this is about 3 grams of fresh yeast. And you can see it's hot today. It's already very, very soft. So 3 grams of yeast, and that just goes into our dough now. And you can see, just because I used the flour, that separated the salt and the yeast. So now we can put the yeast in, and it's not going to interact directly with our salt, okay? So just by adding a little bit of flour, that gives us a separation between the salt and the yeast. And now the yeast can start eating the sugars and the starch inside the flour. Okay, and now we're pretty much home and dry. So we're just gonna add half of this flour. We're going to do it in 2 stages. And now we can turn on our dough mixer. And the reason these dough mixers are so much better is because the way they're designed, they really work and knead the dough and bring the air into the dough and really work the gluten structure and create a really strong dough. So let's talk about dough. What are we actually doing? Right now, we are building the strength in the dough. By kneading it, we are creating a strong gluten network. And what's going to happen is, when we let it rest for 24 hours, in that time, the yeast is going to eat the sugars in the flour, and then it's going to create CO2, and it's going to ferment, and it's going to firstly develop flavor, which is where it smells like a really nice, almost alcoholic. It's got that fermented flavor, and it's gonna rise because of the CO2. And so what we need to do at this stage is create a strong network of gluten so that it can catch all of that gas. And then when we're ready to cook it, you're gonna see we get that air inside our crust. And that's basically where the gas expands in the heat of the oven. So that's basically what's going on. And now we're ready to add the rest of our flour. And we just leave that to knead. Now, of course, you can do it by hand. And there's something quite nice about using your hands to create dough. But I also realize that, let's be realistic, if we're gonna make a lot of dough, maybe you wanna have a machine that does it for you. I make a lot of pizza, and I find having one of these is really, really useful. So it's really up to you how much or how far you want to take your hobby. But I do know for a fact that by using these kind of machines, you do get a very consistent result, which is why I like to use them. Saves time, saves energy, and creates a consistent dough. Okay, the dough's coming together now. The hydration level. How much water do I put in my dough? And if I put loads of water in, is it gonna get really sticky and hard to manage? So what I like to suggest is start at 60%. That's your base. And then experiment with going higher and take it up to 65, take it around 70, and see how it performs for you. It's gonna be different depending on the humidity, on the heat of where you live. So there's always gonna be a bit of flexibility. But I think embracing that is a really important thing. I love making pizza because it keeps you humble. It keeps you on your toes, because even when you think you've absolutely nailed it, it's a really hot day, it overproofs, and it's not the perfect dough. But that's okay. I would really recommend you to embrace the challenge of making pizza dough and realize that the more you do it, the more consistent the results are going to get, because you understand your environment, you understand the dough. Okay, let's have a look at our dough. So, what I want to tell you at this point is a lot of people get scared about dough, and they think because it's so sticky, it gets stressful and it's all over your hands, and I get it. I was like that at the beginning as well. But my first tip is use water. Water is your friend in this situation. And that seems counterintuitive. If something is sticky and wet, why would I add water? Surely that would make it more sticky. But actually water is going to make sure that the dough doesn't stick to your hands. So that's my first tip. Second big tip I can give you, at this point, fill this with water. Filling it with water is going to make your cleaning up so much easier. The dough's not going anywhere. Now, wipe this. Otherwise, when you come back to it in an hour and it's all dry, it's going to be a pain to clean. So always clean your dough hook at this point. So the other thing you'll notice is I added this marble board here. Marble and plastic are your friends in the kneading process. If you use marble or plastic, the dough is less likely to stick to the surface. So just wet your hands, and we're just going to turn this a couple times. And now we have a smooth dough. And really, everything's done now. We've added our ingredients, we've kneaded our dough, and now this really just needs time. So just place it into your box, cover the lid, and what I like to do in about 15 minutes, I'll just turn it once more, then I'll cover it and I'll leave it for 18 hours. And I'm gonna get you one that I did earlier so we can have a look. And here's one I made earlier. So here is the dough we just made. And this is after 18 hours. And you can see there's a lot of air bubbles. Underneath, there's a lot of air. And it's ready to ball. So that's basically the process. Leave this now, 18 hours, and you're gonna get this. And again, it's one of those techniques that the more you do it, the less stressful it is. At the beginning, it sticks to your hands, you get really stressful. What I would suggest is have your marble top or use the plastic of the container And that way, you can use the surface to help you ball your dough. And that way, your hands remain nice and clean. So we just weigh it, and from experience, a 250-gram ball is about right for the Revolve oven. I like to do 250-gram balls. And let's talk about the technique. I like to do a technique where I place it on my palm and I move the dough and try and pinch it to the top. Pinch it to the top, pinch it to the top, pinch it to the top, turn it over, move it a little bit like you create an ice cream cone shape with your hands, and then you can place it on your surface and you can give it a couple of pulls. And what we're trying to do is trying to create a really tight surface, which is, again, a little bit like when you blow a balloon. You have a tight surface, and then as it rises, it fills up nice and tight to the structure that you've created. So there is one of our balls. Let's go again. 250 grams. So pull, turn, 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 pinch. Now we check it. 250, and it can be a little bit over, a little bit under. Now, place it on your palm, pinch up, pinch up, pinch up, and then place it onto your surface like this, and roll, 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 roll. So again, it's one of those things where I think people get a little bit stressed about it. They feel a little bit intimidated about, oh, how do I ball a dough? But really, as long as you keep in mind a couple of the tips that I went through, you can't go wrong. Don't get stressed. At this point, your dough is so good, you're not gonna make a bad pizza. Keep that in mind all the time. This is gonna make amazing pizza. If you can get the dough ball to look like that, that's great. If it's a little bit funny looking, don't worry. The more times you do it, the better you'll get. And it's the same when I do pizza classes and people try and do it. Sometimes when they do it for the first time, they find it a little bit strange and it sticks to their hands. But I promise you, if you get a box of dough, maybe do 2 kilos and practice. Make 12 to 14 pizzas. And I promise the first one and the last one, you'll see the difference. It really is a case of practice makes perfect. So, squeeze it, go on, 250. I like to play the game where I try and get it exactly on 250. There we go. And fold up to a point, turn it over, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream, place it down and just roll it on your surface. If you don't have a marble top, you can do it in the plastic container like this and just roll it like that. So you can do it on plastic. You can do it on wood too, but I prefer plastic or marble as my work surface. Roll, roll, roll. And for a kilo of dough, we'll get between 6 and 7 pizza balls. Now, one other tip I can give you, if at the beginning you find it stressful and it's sticking to your hands, wear gloves. For the first 6 months of making pizzas, I wore gloves while I worked with the dough, and that helped to just get used to the technique. Now I don't use gloves and it's absolutely fine, but that's a good tip. The dough has had about 18 hours. Now we've balled it and we're gonna give it another 6 hours. So the total time is 24 hours. There are 6 dough balls. And after another 6 hours, there are our risen dough balls. So you can smell that fermentation, that beautiful smell, slightly alcoholic smelling. Okay, so let's throw one in and see what a direct dough for 24 hours gives us. It's gonna make a beautiful pizza. Here are our 3 stages of our direct dough. This after it's just been kneaded. After 18 hours, it's balled. And after 6 hours, it's ready to cook. 24 hours, amazing results. Here we go. Oh man, look at that. You just can't go wrong. Soft, thin in the middle, airy and light. It's light as a feather. I tell you, every time I make this dough, it reminds me why I love Neapolitan pizza. It's just so light and airy. I play around with a lot of different types of dough recipes and hydrations and all of that. But I swear, every time I come back to this recipe, it reminds me why I fell in love with Neapolitan pizza. It's light, it's airy, it's crunchy. This is your go-to recipe. 24 hours, and it's just guaranteed to taste good every time. Beautiful.